Pan rydych chi'n clywed y tec, edrychwch ar y llun.
Over the course of a hiking trip in Minnesota last summer, I learned that my friend's dad, Laddie, had been a spice collector and professional wine taster and now roasts his own coffee. Given my own growing appreciation for coffee, this last hobby struck me as a rewarding pursuit that I myself could enjoy throughout the next coming year. 3 months later, still inspired to explore the field of coffee, I borrowed an iRoast 2, a cheap hot air roaster from the owner of Mighty Good Coffee, ordered the first bean I found on Sweet Maria's, and began roasting. Since then, I've continued to expand upon my knowledge of coffee, both the roasting process and in brewing, grinding, and coffee preparation. In this video, I'll briefly explain what I've learned about the preparation of coffee, as well as some of my own experiences over the last 9 months. In accordance with the title, this project was divided into 3 portions: a roasting, brewing, and writing portion. The written portion is a Google site called Roasted, Brewed, Written, on which all of the information I have accrued over the course of this project has been consolidated. Part 1. Introduction to Roasting. While most Americans understand the concept of roasting, they know very little about how the term applies to their daily cup of coffee. A primer on roasting. Coffee cherries, such as these, once processed and shipped to the United States, must undergo roasting before they can be consumed. Prior to roasting, the beans are small, dense, and a murky avocado green. Coffee goes through 3 main stages during roasting. First, yellowing. The beans turn yellow and emit a grassy odor and steam. First crack. The beans begin cracking rapidly like popcorn. Caramelization begins. After this point, the coffee can be cooled and consumed at any point. Second crack. The beans begin cracking again, like Rice Krispies this time. Second crack is the breaking of the cellulose within the beans, signaling the end of the roast and imminent combustion. Roasting more than 15 seconds in the second crack is rarely recommended. In between these 2 cracks, the beans can stop roasting and begin their cooling process at any point. The closer to first crack, the lighter the roast, and the closer to second crack, the darker the roast. It's up to the roaster to determine the optimal roast for each bean. In the Bemmer right now is a bean roasting at a very high roast temperature, approaching second crack. Here I'm stopping the bean and cooling it. The immense variety of strains of coffee, as well as the characteristics of beans from individual farms, means that each bean will respond slightly differently to a method of roasting. As such, it is a roaster's responsibility upon finding a high-quality bean from a plantation overseas to determine the degree and method of roast that will maximize the flavor of that. My experiences. My experiences with roasting began with the adoption of an iRoast 2. Our first attempt at roasting with this instrument resulted in a volcanic emission of smoke and ash from the holes atop the roaster, as charred beans neared the point of catching fire inside the roaster and smoke alarms wailed without. I promptly broke the iRoast 2 a short while later, which required some calculated apologizing directed at the man from which we had borrowed the roaster. I did, however, acquire a Bemmer 1600 a month or so later. I have since then accumulated a log of 30 roasts, some of which were good, some of which weren't. My first several roasts, such as this, were dramatically under-roasted, as I had not yet learned to distinguish between first and second crack. My experiences yielded 3 overarching lessons regarding coffee roasting with the Bemmer 1600. Lesson 1. Buy good beans. I had a terrible experience in ordering 10 pounds of Nicaragua Copia Suyatal, a low-quality bean sourced from Nicaragua. Lesson 2. Don't under-roast. Trust that first crack is in fact first crack. In learning about the roasting process, I've repeatedly made the same mistake, and still do, in thinking that first crack is second crack. If you stop the roast as soon as it starts popping and smoking, you will get under-roasted acidic coffee. Lesson 3. Roast to the bean. Even if one roast is good on one particular bean, it may not be on another bean. The Nicaragua, for example, was only good at very, very dark roasts, but not at light roast, which might be good with an Ethiopian bean. After roasting and prior to consumption, coffee must undergo brewing. Since the early days of coffee, brewing has involved steeping ground coffee in hot water. This process dissolves acids and organic compounds within the coffee, collectively known as cafeol, into the water, which is then separated from the remaining grounds. While I cannot thoroughly discuss all of these methods, I will demonstrate several. The Eva Solo. The Eva Solo is a new, elegant, direct immersion brewing method. It uses a coarse grind and mesh filter with a steep time ranging from 1 to 3 minutes. Here I'm pouring a bit of water to bloom the coffee. This is required to release carbon dioxide and prevent bubbling in fresh roasts. The water is then capped off and the Eva Solo will steep for a second. It is then stirred with a wooden spoon or plastic implement to prevent heat loss, continues to steep, and is then poured. It is best consumed within 10 minutes of brewing, as it continues to steep while in the pot. V60 pour over. The V60 pour over is a simple method of brewing a single serving of coffee. 2 tablespoons of medium fine grounds are placed in an already wet filter. Hot water is then poured over them in a circular motion beginning at the outside of the filter. The AeroPress. The AeroPress creates a drink very much like espresso, but not quite as concentrated. It uses all range of grinds, with some advocating coarse and some fine. I use a similar method of blooming the coffee and stirring it with a wooden spoon here. The AeroPress is then flipped, and the water pressed through the grounds and a filter with a plunger, resulting in a concentrated brew, which is then put over ice. It occurred to me, when starting this project, that in devoting so much time to studying coffee, I may entirely destroy my love for the drink. This was wrong. This project encouraged me and sometimes forced me to continue to explore coffee throughout this year, even when I was focusing on other things. And the more I learn about it, the more rewarding an experience it has become. Despite not having much time, I've been able to gradually improve upon my knowledge of coffee and brewing coffee. Aside from the immediate benefit, the capability to make fantastic coffee, my pursuit of coffee as a craft has reminded me that reward gained from hobbies and pursuits mirrors the effort put towards them, a lesson that will perhaps apply to other areas of life beyond caffeine beverages.